Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
I mean, let me tell you, when I need to get up there for a client or a kid, I know that no matter who I go up against, I don't care if they went to Harvard or Yale or both. I know that I'm going to go in there prepared and I'm going to do a damn good job. God forbid I jinx myself. But I mean, I know that I'm going to do a good job because I work hard. Not because I'm the brightest, not because I'm the sharpest tool in the shed, as they say, but because I work hard and I get prepared because I genuinely care. And but that doesn't stop underneath it all from feeling those insecurities. I still get nervous when I go into a courtroom. My voice probably still shakes until I start getting into it. And then suddenly Perry Mason and me takes over and, I'm all good to go. But but I still get nervous.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi, this is Jake Eberly, the producer of the Bonus Babies podcast, and today, Jayne Amelia speaks with Rachel Elovitz. Rachel is an attorney practicing family law and guardian ad litem work, which is representing the best interest of children in Georgia. She's been doing this kind of work for 30 years and makes a huge difference in our community because of it. Here's Rachel Elovitz.
Hey, is this Rachel Elovitz?
It is.
How do you say your name? Elovitz or Elovitz?
Elovitz with a V.
Ooh, okay, nice. So is that your married name or maiden name?
It's my maiden name. My husband was a Kaplan, but he hasn't seen his biological father since he was about 4. He's from Ukraine.
Really?
And his mother married a Roman, Italian, whose last name was Coletti. So that's my husband's last name. But he hasn't seen him since he was 19. And his mother's maiden name is Chepovetsky, so we weren't going there.
Oh, wow.
Too much.
I don't want to say that 3 times fast.
Right.
So thanks so much for agreeing to speak with me. And when we did speak on the phone, you said you didn't feel like you were qualified to do this or that you had enough background. And I mean, our listeners are going to hear, actually, it's the opposite of that. So but just first, let's start. Who are you? What are you about? What's your family of origin? Tell me a little bit. I know you're a Georgia girl.
I am a Georgia girl. I have been here since 1991, so 30-something years, 32 years. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, but my parents were Yankees. Dad's from Pittsburgh. In fact, he studied at the Tree of Life Synagogue. We just had the anniversary of what happened there. My cousin got married there. My mother's from New York. Grew up in Birmingham, Alabama from the time I was 4. I was actually born in Wiesbaden, Germany. My dad was in the United States Air Force. He was a rabbi, a chaplain, and a captain. And
a rabbi in the Air Force. That's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't
well,
realize they had.
My dad is a professional student. He has 3 doctorates: a rabbinical degree, a PhD in ancient history, and a law degree. He currently speaks on geopolitics, but after he finished rabbinical school, they wanted him to help out the United States military. So he joined the Air Force, and they gave him a few options. You usually don't get options, but they gave him some options, and he went and, I think, if I understand correctly, headed up the chaplain services in Europe. That's why I was born in Wiesbaden. When we came back, I was 13 months old. They were on the plane, and actually was the breakout of the 1967 war in Israel. And the pilot came on and said that there was going to be no Israel by the time they landed. And thank God that was not the case.
Wow. And actually, for you to bring that up right now, since what's going on in Israel,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure it's really hard to it's hard for everyone actually, but I'm sure especially for the people who are thinking about it all the time, who have family there, uh, who want to go back to their home, right?
absolutely.
It's just a
I haven't stopped watching the news. I mean, I have friends whose kids were called up. I have family there that I actually don't know, but I have friends there myself. I have friends with nephews that have been called up, friends who live there. It's scary.
yeah, it certainly is. So then you ended up in school here. You were going to be a UGA, but you followed your guy? Is that what I heard?
Oh, is that what Dee said? So I had started dating someone in high school. Not one of the best decisions of my life, but he was younger than I was, and I wanted to go to the University of Texas, but I needed to go to UGA first to make my grades. I wasn't the best tester, but I did make my grades, and I was going to transfer. And then he decided he wanted to go there, so I gave him a year. And then I transferred, and it was a huge mistake. I loved Georgia. I had great friends at Georgia. I was a sweetheart at Georgia. That's how I got to meet Daryl,
Yeah.
your other half. Yeah. So that
Okay,
was.
so his version of it is quite a bit different. So that guy's gone
Oh, it
then?
is.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
so.
long gone, long gone.
Long
Yeah, that
gone.
was that was decades gone. Thank God. Yeah. I mean, God
So
bless him. I hope he's well. But yes.
right, so do you have any brothers or sisters?
I do. They're both physicians. My sister is the dean of women's health at Mount Sinai Hospital, and my brother is a physician in Texas, Private Health Dallas. He's a concierge doc. He's a really good doctor. They both are.
So you've a little bit of like overachievers in the family, all coming from your dad?
Yeah, my mom too. My mom has a master's herself in guidance and counseling. Used to work rape crisis when I was a kid. So
Oh, really? Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Is that something that you learned about early too? Did she share her work with you?
No, I mean she didn't get into specifics. I just remember being proud of what she did, but no, she didn't bring home stories or anything like that. It is kind of weird though that I kind of took from both my parents with what I do, you know.
Yeah, so tell me about your work now, because this is what makes you super qualified to be on this podcast, even though you think you're not somehow. But anyway,
So I've been practicing law since 1996, and I've done almost entirely family law. And back in 2001, I decided I wanted to do guardian ad litem work. The firm I was with at the time, there wasn't money in doing that, so they didn't want me to do it. Or there wasn't at the time. It's amazing how much some lawyers make now doing guardian ad litem work. But and for people who may not know what that is,
yes, please explain for us.
yeah. So guardians ad litem, at least here in Georgia, may be a little bit different state to state, but here you represent the best interests of children in custody cases, in dependency cases, and what we used to call deprivation cases. We now call it dependency. Most states call it dependency, abuse and neglect. But I started out doing it in Superior Court, where in divorce and modification of custody cases, you're doing an investigation, you're speaking to parents, you're observing them with the children, you're speaking to doctors if there are medical issues, to educators if there are academic issues or attendance issues. You're speaking to third party witnesses, to experts, psychologists that work with the family, specialists, and you are making recommendations to the court about what you think should happen with custody, parenting time, any parenting parameters. Back in 2007 ish, I started doing it for the juvenile court. And here, that's the court that deals with abuse and neglect cases, among other cases. But those are the ones I tend to work on. I quickly told them I did not want to represent the parents of abused and neglected children. I represent the children. And it's not to say that all parents are bad parents. It's just for me, it was easier working with the kids who had been hurt than working with the parents who had allegedly hurt them. There are some parents who get back on their feet and who do a great job, and some of them just need parenting skills. Some of them have cognitive issues, some of them have psychological issues, and but it's sometimes they have kids who are difficult, and you have to get the kids help, and the parents just don't know how to help them. So the state steps in, and ideally, you end up with families that are reunified. Unfortunately, in a lot of my cases, that doesn't happen.
And so, how does a case come to you? Is it through social services or what? Like, if you give me an example, like, how about your first case, like, or one of your early cases?
I don't know that I could go back that far in my memory bank, but
Yeah.
I so
Well, you can just make it up too. Mhm.
so it depends on the case. If it's a family law case, those I do privately, and I just someone will call me and say I need your services. They may hear about me from a former client. It may be a former client that has a new situation where they need me. It's mostly referrals or clients who are coming back. With dependency cases, with abuse and neglect cases, it's one of two things. Either a superior court judge has a family law case, like a divorce or custody case, where there are issues that need to be addressed, and the judge wants a guardian ad litem's input, but maybe the parties can't afford a guardian ad litem. So they send it down to juvenile court, and then the juvenile court ends up expending their resources, which sometimes is a sticky issue because they have limited resources for abused and neglected kids. But sometimes you have kids who are being hurt or who are being psychologically abused or who are just in a really toxic situation, and the court wants some input and the people can't afford to pay for a guardian because it's like paying for a third lawyer or paying for a lawyer, and maybe they can't afford their own. So they send it down to juvenile court, and then the juvenile court calls me and says, we need a guardian. The reason a lot of people don't do this is because they pay very little. And it's different county to county. The county that I do it in, it used to be $40 an hour out of court, $60 an hour in court. It's gone up. It's now 50 and 75. But, let's say you're going out to a home to see a child and you'd spend 2 hours of your day getting out there and back, plus your time there. Let's say you spend an hour and you're only getting, $40, $50 an hour for being out there, but you've spent 3 hours of your time. Meanwhile, if you do work privately, most of the lawyers who've been doing this as long as I have family law work, they're charging 400, 500, 600, 700. So a lot of people don't want to do it because there's not a lot of money in it. But I do it because I feel like it's important to do, and because there's some judges I'm not going to say no to, because I respect them.
Well, I wonder if that's true in other states. I'm sure that the attorneys here who work for the California, it's called the CLC.org, but they're all children's attorneys. And I know they don't make a lot of money, not compared to what they could make on the open market. But I hope it's more than $50 an hour, because then you're really just doing it for love. I mean, that's not even, you can't really even live on that nowadays.
Right. Well, and what I started to say a minute ago, and then I realized I never finished it, is if you're going out to someone's house and let's say you're just checking on them and you spent 30 minutes and you're getting $40 an hour, although like I said, that's more or less 50. So it's $25 for that time, and you're not charging for your travel. Then you've spent 3 hours of your day. You've spent $25. You spent part of that, or made $25. You spent part of that on your gas. There aren't a lot of people who want to do that when they can be sitting in their office making $500, $600 an hour talking to one of their divorce clients. You know what I mean? So, or
Wow.
whatever area they practice. Which, I understand everyone's got to feed their family, but I think if the juvenile courts were able to pay better, they would have more retention. They need more lawyers. They need good lawyers. Not that they don't have good lawyers, they do, but there are very few people that will do it. And I think that's part of the problem with the whole welfare system. I mean, child welfare system. You have, DFACS has some really good people, but there are also some people that probably shouldn't be doing what they do. There's a high turnover rate. They don't pay them the way they should. They overwork them, and it's unfortunate. And there's the foster care system altogether. I mean, there aren't enough parents to do it, so that you end up here. You've had kids in extended stay at times. You've had them in hotels. You've had them staying at DFACS overnight. You hear the same thing in other states, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I just
I hope
can't
I don't get
understand.
sued for saying any of this.
No, no, no.
Strike
I
that.
listen.
Okay.
We've all heard that,
Yeah.
and if people haven't heard it, they need to know it.
Yeah.
That in spite of the millions, maybe billions of dollars that is thrown at the child welfare system, it is failing the kids. It's also failing the parents. And you're absolutely right. In terms of retention, to have good people stay involved, it's very hard. And most people are doing it, who are good at it, are like you, who are saying, I made a choice to do this work because I feel it's really necessary and there are not enough good people doing it. Have you got friends who also do this work?
I know some people in juvenile court that do this. I'm not close with any of them. My closest friends are family lawyers that I've known just from doing this for years, but most of them don't do juvenile court work. Like I said, there aren't a lot of people who do it. I mean, that's probably not fair to say. Um, in my world, from the years I've been doing this, I just there are the same faces, the same committed people over and over again in the juvenile court that I see when I'm there, and it doesn't. You don't see that many new faces, unfortunately. Now that said, since COVID in the county where I do juvenile court work, it's all virtual. So I do see other people, but I see them on the screen and they go off when their case is done. So it's I don't, and there may be faces I'm missing, new faces I'm not seeing, but and certainly I'm not at every. I'm on there for certain calendars. Do you know what I mean when I say calendars?
Right, yes.
I know I use legal lingo. Yeah. So, maybe I'm on a Tuesday calendar for a case and I might not have something else come up for weeks in the juvenile court, but they have stuff every day. So there's certainly plenty of people that I don't know that are there. But it seems to me that whenever I'm on there, I'm seeing the same faces that I've seen for years. And, it's great that these people are committed, but you don't see a lot of new faces. At least I haven't noticed it.
Okay, so I want to ask you, how do you? Can you tell me about some of the kids? Like,
Yeah.
what's happened with them? Give me an example of one kid.
Kind of stuff I see.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have like all these different situations going in through my head. I mean, it's funny, like you would expect that I would tell you something like, oh God, these kids are all beaten up. And it's rare that I see kids who are suffering physical abuse, at least in the cases I've received. Most of them are not getting to school regularly. They are not getting their medical needs met. They have psychological issues that maybe aren't getting met. And that's not to say that I haven't had kids who were abandoned by their parents, kids who, I have one client. Of course, I'm not going to say any names, but her parents are not psychologically well. One, we have no idea where that person is, and the other one has effectively abandoned her. But she's got grandparents who have stepped up and aunts who have stepped up. And I remember a case years ago where the parents they were doing meth and they got help, and it took 2 years. They got the kids back, and then it happened again. And you would think I would see that more often. I know in some counties in Georgia, that's terrible. That was the only time I think I've had a case that involved meth in particular. I've represented a kid who had been taken from his mom because she had another child who had died in her care because she had left that child with the wrong person. And she ended up getting the child I represented back, and she was in a much better place at that point, and she had learned a hard lesson. Yeah, I mean, it's all kinds of things. I've had kids before that have come here from other countries that were living with relatives that had been trafficked and thankfully gotten out of that situation. It's just all over the place. There's all different issues.
Okay, so what I want to ask you is, when you are assigned a case,
Yeah.
do you feel like you have a lot of information, a lot of background, or do you have to do a lot of investigation to figure out what's really going on?
It depends. If it's a superior court case, often there are lawyers involved, and they will send me the pleadings, they will send me evidence, and they send you a lot. If it's a juvenile court case, I basically get pleadings from the court that says, we've got this kid. He's here because there are allegations that his mom's using drugs. She has been panhandling with the kids. There's some psychological issues. They were in care 2 years ago. She's not getting the kids to school. And then I often you won't even see phone numbers or they're the wrong phone numbers on the pleadings. And then it's a matter of trying to find out where the mother is, who's taking care of the kids, where they've been placed. If the defects caseworker gets changed a number of times, or the kid is disrupting, meaning they are acting out in their foster home, then you might finally get in touch with the foster parent only to find out the kid disrupted and they had been moved to a temporary home over the weekend. And then before you can find out where they are, get a response from the department, they've moved them into another new home, and next thing you know, they've disrupted there. I mean, I have one child, God bless her. She's probably disrupted over the years she's been in care. She has, some psychological issues. She's a sweet girl, but she's probably disrupted. God, if I had to guess, I'd probably say 20 homes, and I may be low. I mean, it's hard,
Wow.
and you know, it's not always the kid's fault. I mean, sometimes, and I don't mean to use the word fault, but sometimes the kid acts up, and the foster parent says, I didn't sign up for this, I didn't do this, it's too hard, or they've got stuff in their own family, or the kid misses their parents, so they're running away, or I mean, just again, it could be any number of issues. Sometimes you have put kids in a foster situation where another kid in that home starts being inappropriate with them. It's an imperfect system, unfortunately, like everything else.
Yeah, so what allows you to stay in it? Because I could imagine that you could do it for maybe 10 years and say, okay, I did my good work and now I'm going to move on and make some money or run for office or something.
Yeah. Um, so I had a case where the child had lived with her parents, who the police had been out to their house a couple dozen times for domestic violence. And ultimately, there was a divorce, and there may have been some drug use. There was at one point by both parents. There may still be by at least one of them. The court was asked to please order the parties to do drug tests. Rachel. So one of the parties didn't do it. And I mean, you've got this child. She has been in a home where she is getting bitten up by fleas. She is getting playing outside, doing dirt bikes without parental supervision, coming back with ticks on her body, not brushing her teeth, having teeth extracted at a really young age. She's at an age where she should have been able to read for years. She can't read, but for some reason, she's at a school where her teachers are passing her up and giving her A's. Um, and she's with one parent, but the other parent works from early in the evening until the middle of the night, even though that parent could probably take better care of her if that parent was home. So, what do you do with that? And how do you walk away from a kid who needs someone to be speaking up for them when they're in that kind of situation? So, that's how you stay in it.
Right, so that's why you stay in it, because you know that
Yeah.
the kid needs someone speaking up for.
Yeah.
So does the kid know that? Like, do you have a relationship with your clients in general?
This particular kid calls me all the time. Yeah. It's not always like that. I'll often give them my number. Sometimes they'll call, sometimes they don't, but this particular child will. Um, and one of the parents has not been happy about that, but I don't care. you know, I mean, I want the child to know they have someone they can call and they can feel safe, and sometimes they call me for silly reasons. It'll be my mom wouldn't let me ride my bike, or, you know, but then sometimes, sometimes it'll be, my dad's friend was hitting me, and that's not okay. And that's something I want to know. Is this parent letting this child be around this person? Is this person really hitting this child? And I have to, maybe ask some more questions, or, or go out and see the child. But it may be that, a minute later, the child says, well, they really didn't hit me. It's just they said they were going to if I didn't start acting right. Sometimes it takes a minute to find out what's really going on. Sometimes you get text that looks scary until you talk to them. I need to talk to you right now. I can't watch, my dad won't let me watch this TV show, and it could be something just completely. And it's funny when you get those calls late at night, shouldn't you be in bed? Where's your dad? Where's your mom? But
Yeah, so I'm assuming that you also have kids, right?
I don't.
You
Um,
don't. You don't have kids.
Not because I didn't want them. It just wasn't in the cards for us. I did get pregnant once, but it didn't take. I had a
Mm.
miscarriage. Yeah. So we've had dog children.
Hmm. I don't have kids either, and it's not because I didn't want them. Just wasn't in the cards for me either.
Yeah,
And
I'm sorry.
I yeah, I do wonder, if my work with kids throughout my adult life, and also now with my CASA work, and I mean, I'm sure that that is in part because I love being around kids, and I love the idea that maybe I can help one kid's life be a little bit better,
Absolutely.
or or maybe two or maybe three, depending on what happens. But you're kind of doing it regularly, Rachel.
I don't even do it that regularly. I have more family law cases than dependency cases, but I don't know. They probably tug on my heartstrings more. Although, I got to tell you, sometimes the stuff you see in the divorce world and in custody battles is worse than the stuff you see in juvenile court. It's really kind of disgusting what people do to their children.
Yeah, I've
The way
I've
they
heard
use them
that.
as pawns, they put them in the middle, they alienate them from the other parent. It's really pretty sad. And I got to tell you, doing abuse and neglect, I hope this comes out right, but there are kids out there that are who are truly abused and neglected, and it's horrific. There are people out there, and I wouldn't have believed this earlier in my career, um, who fabricate allegations of abuse. I see it in the divorce world, and I've represented people who've been falsely accused, and the experts all. It was so obvious when I talked to them that that's what had happened, but we got experts involved, and they all found the same thing. And thankfully, the judge and usually the guardians ad litem saw through it all as well. There were exceptions where maybe a guardian didn't see it, but the judge thankfully did, and the person accused ended up getting custody. But it was, I mean, just really patent fabrication, just to try and keep a child from a loving parent, which is really, to me, a form of child abuse itself.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. One of the things that has been most difficult for me and many of the people whom I know, as I learn more about what's happening with kids in care, in particular, never mind in a really nasty divorce battle. That's just, and I agree, it's just horrific. But for the kids in care, it's amazing to me that there's so many kids who just get shoved around from one thing to the next, that they have nothing. They've got no real support system, and then they get moved and moved and moved, and they start acting out. I'm sorry, but a lot of times just because they're moved and moved and moved, they have no stable emotional and loving home life. So I can expect that response, that of course they're going to be disruptive, or
100%.
because they that's the only way they can navigate, right?
Yeah, listen, even the kids like the one I was telling about earlier who's disrupted a lot. What choice, what chance did she have? It's some of these kids grow up in such dysfunction um and poverty often, and sometimes the parents are doing the best they can, but it's just not enough to take care of these kids. I had one parent who had almost as many children as I have on both of my hands, and they were all from different
Wow.
fathers, and
Mm.
every one of them was from a different father. And this is one of the things that concerns me about the welfare system, so child welfare system. So she would come to court, her hair all done, her nails all done. She was getting, when there were questions asked of her, like, how are you making money because you want to get these kids back? How are you able to support yourself? Are you able to support them? And certainly that's like a side question. That's not, the primary thing, obviously, that the court's looking at. But she'd be asked these questions, and she'd say, well, I'm getting SSI for my kids. I'm getting Social Security for my kids. And the kids had been in care for years. And the department was paying for them. Taxpayers were paying for them. But this SSI money was still going to this mother who wasn't caring for them. It should have been going to the state. But the state didn't have the time or resources or personnel to be able to work with, I guess, I don't know if it's the tax commissioner or Social Security, I guess, not the tax commissioner's office. I don't know why I just said that, but the Social Security office. I think they had to, I remember them telling me something about maybe they had to just submit an affidavit so that those monies would then come to them instead, but they didn't have the resources to do it. I don't know what all the logistics would have been for them to do that. All I know is that over the years, the amount of money that was poured into this family, thank goodness, to take care of these kids, psychologists, therapists, psychological evaluations, psychosexual evaluations for all these kids, foster parents, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And yet this mother who wasn't caring for them was still getting money from the state, also taxpayer dollars, that should have been going to the department to help them. I mean, there are definitely problems with the system that need to be remedied. And I'm not on that side of things, so I don't really know to what extent maybe they have been remedied some over the years, but I've certainly seen some waste, some economic waste. Um, Monies that were going to someone who wasn't caring for the kids that should have been going to those who were caring for them.
Yeah, I have certainly seen that too. And I've mentioned on the program before that I remember when the first time it really landed on me that my role as a CASA was a volunteer role, and therefore I wasn't owned by anybody. I didn't have a job because of this kid who was in trouble. I was in a caregiver family meeting for one kid who was having trouble for my CASA kiddo. And there were about 12 other people in the room, all being paid to be there to address what was happening with this child. If the child was not in trouble, no one would have had a job in that room. And I thought to myself, all these people are here because this kid her family's failed her, and now she's having trouble. She's acting out. There were behavioral issues. There were problems at school. And they're all here at this meeting being paid in some ways, not necessarily to help her, but to keep addressing issues that were showing up that they were being paid to address.
Right.
I was like, wow, what? That's just wrong.
Right. Some of these issues that come up, they tend to roll into the next generation. So, what I mean by that is you see kids who come into care and a few years later they're having babies, and then by the time you find out they're pregnant again, and you see the same, suddenly they're in independent living, which the state's also funding and helping them to learn to be on their own, which again is great, but they're there with their children.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
And they were foster kids themselves. And you see this cycle in these families where things don't get better, and it's heartbreaking. Now, and this one I started to tell you about earlier with the many children, that mother ultimately got most of her kids back. Some of them went to a grandparent, but that was a great day. We were in the courtroom cheering, So, but I wish we had more of those days. I've got some kids that have been in the system for so many years because reunification isn't an option because the parents haven't completed their parenting plans because they're not capable of completing them because of psychological roadblocks or other, I don't know, psychosocial issues. I don't know what the hindrance is, but they just can't seem to get either. I don't want to say they don't care enough. Usually I think it's more that they're not capable.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, for whatever reason, they're not stepping up, and the kids are getting older, and there aren't enough foster homes that want to move to adoption. So the kids aren't getting adopted. They become, in the eyes of those who want to adopt, sometimes too old. They already have been in the system too long. They're worried about the issues they have. They've disrupted too many times. People are afraid to move to adoption. Or I've actually had one foster parent that was keen on never moving to adoption because the money that they were offered, the financial benefits of doing so, the cost of doing so and the financial benefits of doing so, weighing it all, it was better for him to continue to be a foster parent, and to keep those kids in long-term foster care. There's also legal guardianship. There are other avenues, but sometimes you end up with, and in all fairness, sometimes there are kids who say, I don't want to be adopted. I always want to be my parents' child. I don't want to be under anyone else's guardianship. I don't want to be adopted. I'd rather stay in this long-term foster home and hope that even if I'm ending up getting moved from here to there, because I'm hoping one day my mom's going to be okay or my dad's going to be okay and they're going to be able to take me back. or because you have a parent who's interfering, even though they know that they can't take care of this child, but they're telling them, don't agree to adoption. Don't tell them you don't want to be adopted. Let them hear you, because the parent doesn't want that, even if it might be best for their child.
I want to ask you something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and that's the question of values. Were you raised thinking about values, or in your adult life or early life, did you say, was that ever something that came up, or was it unspoken, or what?
You're talking about, can you be more specific? How do you mean values?
Well, I guess values in terms of how to live your life as a good person, how to give back,
Yeah.
integrity or compassion, or
Um,
and that's why I'm asking, because I
yeah.
never really thought about values
Yeah.
as a young person. I've thought about it much more as an adult. And although I'm sure I was raised with values, but I never really heard the word. We didn't talk about it.
Yeah. So I think part of it was unspoken but experienced. Like when I told you my mom did rape response, and she was for 20 something years, I believe she did vocational rehabilitation. So I saw her walking the walk, you know. My dad during my young years was a practicing rabbi. He had a pulpit, and then he was a lawyer for 20 something years until he actually had some malpractice done, so he lost his voice and he could no longer be a litigator. But even now, he does these geopolitical lectures around the world, and he's always trying to give back, to educate. And of course, even my younger siblings, I have they always wanted to be physicians, so it's funny that I had their example even as younger kids. I had I went down a difficult road for a while, and not like drugs or anything like that. I had a hard time, and and ended up going back to law school, and thought about being a counselor for a while. I decided I had too many of my own issues when I was younger to do that. But being a lawyer was my way of hoping that I could give back some way. And there is this concept. I'm a Jewish girl, and there's this concept in Judaism called tikkun olam, which means to repair the world. And I don't know that I heard the words tikkun olam growing up. I'm not sure when that I started hearing that in that way. I think I more saw it when I was younger, even though my dad was the rabbi. But as an adult, I've tried to be better in recent years, because for many years, I was not terribly involved in my community other than being a lawyer. And then a few years ago, and tell me if I'm getting too far off base here and you
No,
want me to.
please. This is
Okay.
no. This is really valuable.
So a few years ago, my father's remarried, and his wife's mother, who was like 102 at the time, passed away. And my dad called me. He was in the hospital with her. Her daughters, she has three daughters, they had left, as most people would after they had passed. But my dad stayed with her until the coroner got there, or until they came to get her. And he said, I didn't want to leave her alone, because there's this concept in Judaism that you stay with the body until they have time to transition. You don't leave them alone. So I called a synagogue that I'm affiliated with, and my husband and I, we're spiritual people, or I am. He grew up in this former Soviet Union, so he's more. He's not, probably not as much, but we're pretty secular. So we don't really go to synagogue, but I wanted to do something more for the community. So there is a group of people that stay with the body, or wash the body, or care for the body after somebody dies. It's called Tahara. And so I am part of the group that does that. Unfortunately, the last few times they've called me to come help, I've either had COVID or been out of town or haven't been able to help, but I've done it a number of times. I also joined the Atlanta Israel Coalition, their board, and the Jewish Community Relations Council, which are some of the ways that I try and give back to.
Wow. Okay. So wait a minute. So just go back for
Yeah.
me. So what's that like, to care for a body for someone who you don't know, and you come in as a group, and
So it's usually
you do what?
a few women, and you come in, and the body is, I hope it's all right for me to be talking about this. The person who has passed is on a medical table, and you wash them, and You say prayers for them, and you put some Jerusalem dirt on their eyes, and you put clean sheets around them, and it's in a way it's difficult, but it's moving. It's difficult some ways because I mean cleaning them, sometimes there's not a lot to clean. Sometimes the body starts to release, so you have to clean.
So there is a lot to clean,
Yeah.
right?
Um, but
How did you decide that you were right for that?
I mean, I guess I didn't know that I was, but when my dad stayed with his mother-in-law, I knew that this was something that we did in Judaism, that you stayed with the body, and I wanted to do that. I didn't know that here the funeral home actually does it, but the people, the group that I'm a part of, what they do is it's called tahara. You go and you actually clean the body. So I didn't even know when I started it exactly what I was going to be doing. I just knew I needed to to do something. I felt like I had worked for a nonprofit when I first moved here in the Jewish community, and I did not have a good experience with this particular organization that I won't mention. And I was really stayed away from the community for a long time, for very, very, very long time. And I just felt like I needed to do something to give back. And that was less agency and more human, if that makes any sense. And I am this is shameful. I have not been to Israel since I was 17. I spent 6 weeks there, but I love my Jewish homeland very much. And I wanted to do something for Israel, which is why I ended up on the board of the Atlanta Israel Coalition, which is actually a coalition of people from all over the world. And, being on the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council, also gives me an opportunity through that to reach out to they work with interfaith partners, not just the Jewish community. So, for example, the last couple of years, I worked on the Hunger Seder, which they do every year here. They do it. They do have Hunger Seders in other cities as well and across the country. But the Hunger Seder, it's an interfaith thing where we've had last year. It was over Ramadan, and we had a special room so that our Muslim friends could pray. We had ministers from various churches there, and we brought together people from all over the community to have this Seder where we talked about the needs of the hungry, food insecurity. Um, we had these various partners like Second Helpings Atlanta and Wholesome Wave Georgia and the Food Bank, Atlanta Food Bank, and we all came together to have this Seder where we talked about the community's needs and how to get involved. So it's really great.
So how do you feel about that for yourself if you reflect on it? How do you feel about you doing that work?
Good, but I always feel like I should be doing a lot more. It just never quite feels like enough. But
Hmm.
I wish I was someone who could, give a lot of money to, and that maybe didn't have to practice law and could volunteer all the time. But then, sometimes when I practice, look, practicing law can be a blessing and a burden. There are times where I just don't like anybody, other lawyers, parties
Hmm.
to the case. I'm just like, God, I feel like everybody is just really mean hearted, mean spirited, antagonistic. And who knows, people have probably said that about me at times. Practicing law is not always a pretty business, especially like in divorce work. You're only hearing largely from your client. Hopefully you see through if they're giving you BS, but sometimes you don't. And sometimes lawyers on the other side, you're convinced, don't see the truth, and they are really digging down in their positions, and you feel like what they're doing is advocating for their client at the expense of young children. And you just like, there are days where I want to throw up my hands and say, no more. I've done this for almost 30 years and I am done. And then there are days where you get off the phone with a kid or a client who says, I can't tell you how grateful I am for you. And you think, and your dad says something to you like, you really need to keep doing this, Rachel. People need you. And you don't know that that's really true, but you want to believe it. So
Yeah, I think you can believe it, Rachel. I think you can believe it.
thanks, Jamie.
I mean, I just And I can tell by speaking with you that you're so modest, and it's kind of refreshing because a lot of times, that's not the rap that attorneys have. You know that, right?
Yeah, we do get a bad rap. I think often deservedly, but yeah. Ay.
I want to, yeah, go
No, no,
ahead.
no. I was just breathing.
Okay, so I want to ask you one last thing that I ask all my
Yeah.
guests, and that is, what is the one thing that no one would ever know about you unless you told them?
Mm,
And I'm going to give an example. This is for me.
okay.
I'm actually a really bad stutterer, and I have been my whole life. When I was a little girl, I used to stutter so badly I would pass out so I wouldn't have to speak. That was my trick. And yet, I grew up. I became an actor. I do voiceovers. I'm doing a podcast, but I'm actually always just on the cusp of a stutter that no one really knows unless I tell them.
Janie, I would have, first of all, I would have had no idea. Secondly, listening to you tell me about what you do, you and Daryl are such the power team. It's just unbelievable. I don't know how much your listeners know about Daryl or if you even want me to mention him, but
Okay, she mentioned him again because she's the president of the Daryl M.
right,
Blocker
right.
fan
I
club.
definitely am.
This is his friend Rachel
Hi.
from college.
And Daryl is, oh my God. I mean, someone who gave 4 years of his life to the Air Force and intelligence and 28 years to the CIA. And he's a creative consultant for Hollywood. And he deals, I mean, he helps the foster community, and he helps the community that helps those who have been sexually trafficked. And he was on the short list for CIA director and should have been it. But I mean, this is just an amazing,
She's the president of the
yeah,
fan club. Yeah,
amazing
yeah.
human being and such a mensch. And I, yes, I'm definitely on his fan club. And by the way, he's always on ABC, so listen for him because he's the bomb. But Jenny, knowing him and now listening to your background, I'm like, oh my God, you both are just such amazing people. You really just incredibly talented people.
I'm putting it right back on you because if there weren't people like you keeping an eye and advocating for kids, and there are people like you all over the country, amazingly, there's more people like you. And I don't know how you do it every day. See, I do a little piece of it, just a tiny piece of it. And you say you do a tiny piece of it too, because you mostly do family law. But the reality is, have worked for 30 years advocating for children, and it's pretty awesome. Rachel, you need to get behind that.
Thank you. But being a CASA is pretty awesome too. I mean, you do the same thing I do, just not being a lawyer. And the truth is, CASA, some of them are probably better equipped than lawyers because of their backgrounds. And it just,
Perhaps.
yeah.
All right, answer my question. What is the one thing that no one would ever know about you unless you told them?
That I so my clients sometimes think that I am this. Like, it's not always good to be a bulldog, but they know that if I need someone to stand up for them, I'll do that. And I have no problem, whether it's in a courtroom, whether it's in correspondence, whether it's on the phone, standing up for my clients and for my child clients, my adult clients. You don't always see the insecurity. You don't see the Rachel that walks into a courtroom and, especially with what's going on in the world, Janie, I don't want to get emotional when I say this, but the Rachel that feels like people are looking at her and looking down on her. Other attorneys who I wonder, do they think less of me because they see the Jewish star on my chest, because I'm the short little Jewish girl, because I don't know. I guess this isn't the show to talk about what I experienced growing up, but there is that insecurity there. I mean, I'll just give you a short thing. When I was growing up in Birmingham, Alabama, we had Jew Corner. I had pennies rolled at my feet when I'd come into the high school. It said, you're gonna have to bleep this, but you fucking Jew on my locker.
Wow.
I don't think the principal ever came up to me and asked me if I was okay. I don't think anyone ever took it off. And 6 years after I'd graduated, my brother, God bless him, was top of his class, number one on the high school tennis team. I think he was third in his class. When I say top, he was at the top, but I think it was number three. He'd never been in trouble. They didn't even offer for him to be in the Honor Society. And the day of his graduation, they came up to him and said, they handed him the ribbons, that you wear over you when you're in the Honor Society, and they said you should be wearing these. And he said, no, thank you. We used to have issue getting Jews into the Honor Society. There were 6 high school sororities, and Jews weren't allowed in. I had literature in my locker with and a teacher and a student who were trying to convert me. I mean, it was. I was teased. I just, it sounds so stupid, but as a kid, it really hurts when you feel that people don't like you. And, I was called all kinds of names. And I remember, thinking that I was ugly and stupid and everything they called me, and wondering, is it because I'm Jewish, because I'm different, because they really think I'm ugly, because they really think I'm stupid? And, you kind of take some of that with you into adulthood. It never really leaves you.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. And I'm sure that part of that experience is what has been keeping you in the game right now, Rachel,
Yeah.
advocating for
I mean, let me
kids.
tell you, when I need to get up there for a client or a kid, I know that no matter who I go up against, I don't care if they went to Harvard or Yale or both. I know that I'm going to go in there prepared, and I'm going to do a damn good job. God forbid I jinx myself. But I mean, I know that I'm going to do a good job because I work hard, not because I'm the brightest, not because I'm the sharpest tool in the shed, as they say, but because I work hard and I get prepared because I genuinely care. And, you know, but that doesn't stop underneath it all from feeling those insecurities. I still get nervous when I go into a courtroom. My voice probably still shakes until I start getting into it. And then suddenly Perry Mason and me takes over, and, I'm all good to go. But but I still get nervous. I
Right.
still get nervous.
Is there anything else you'd like to say to people listening about either what you care about or what you do or who you are?
No, I would just say, if you care about kids and you don't have them, or you do have them, and you have the time to, bring another one into your home, foster, look into it, or look into being a CASA, because it's an amazing thing to do, to basically do what I do as a guardian ad litem, even if you're not a lawyer. In some states, you don't have to be a lawyer to be a guardian ad litem. In Georgia, you do, but, look into it, give back, be there for kids who could really, use some love and support.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for talking with me today, and thanks for being who you are.
Thank you for being who you are. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Rachel, for taking the time to speak with us about what you do. And I concur with Jayne that you're giving back in a huge way. And I also want to comment on what you went through in high school, with all of the anti-Semitism that you faced. It's not stupid at all. It's bullying. It informs who you are, and you carry that with you today, over 30 years later. And these administrators at this school should be ashamed to reinforce the ugliness that this is. It's propagating racist hate. By not doing anything, they're actually supporting that point of view. Even more disturbing is that those kids, they actually learned to hate from someone. It's in their communities and in their family conversations, maybe even in their churches. Ironic. They learned that it was okay to treat you like that. But thankfully, you've leaned into your compassion and give back in huge ways by supporting the kids and families who are struggling. So thank you again for joining us and sharing your story. It makes a big difference for people to hear it. Next week, please join us for another special guest. There's a lot going on in the world that might make you feel that there's very little hope. But please be compassionate. Be kind to yourself and those around you. You can never do too much of that. Thank you for listening, and be well. If you or someone you know is harming themselves or thinking about harming themselves, go to crisistextline.org. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org. And in LA,
CASALA.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposta. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at bonusbabies.org. See you next time.